What wedding moment made you think, ooh, they're not going to last long? She told me 2 days before that she found her fiancé annoying and that she didn't like him and that he was awful in bed. She was visibly, endlessly uncomfortable at the rehearsal, wedding, and dinner combo. Then she sobbed the entire morning day of. She ended up not getting any makeup done because she wouldn't stop scream-sobbing and refused to get dressed, stalling the wedding by like 35 minutes. Then she said 45 minutes of vows that she had prepared, 9 pages of things like inappropriate vows to friends, family, his parents and sisters, none of them to her husband, and then almost didn't say I do. Managed to get a, yeah, okay, yeah I do, out of her almost a full 60 seconds after she was supposed to say anything. I could go on for hours, but it was the most painful and awkward wedding I've ever been to. I've got my money on maybe 10 months. We're 1 month in. 2.5 month update, I've distanced myself from them completely. She's really clingy and likes to gossip about how awful her husband is, and I really don't have the time. She's also told me they're in couples therapy after I expressed negativity towards some extremely concerning things she said regarding their relationship and lack of communication. But I'm still betting on 10 months because she believes it's all his fault and truly believes his parents and sisters are exactly the same. Newsflash, they're all lovely people. 5-month update, I no longer associate with them, so I'm out of the loop regarding the juicy details. Last I heard, they keep moving all over the country and fight non-stop. No more lovey-dovey images on social media. Seems to be right on track for a 10-month breakup. Strangely enough, I didn't have the thought about the couple getting married, but the best man and maid of honor who were married to each other. The best man's speech was all about how hard it was to be married. I've been married for a year and it feels like 100 years. Maid of honor stands up to give a speech and just says, ditto. It was so awkward and really brought the whole room down. The brother of the bride stood up and gave a nice impromptu speech about teamwork and having a partner to go through life with. How happy the family was to have the groom join their family. Best man and maid of honor were divorced within a year. The couple who got married are still married 30 years later. I sometimes wonder if the speeches were actually helpful in how not to act as a couple. There's some complex backstory to the brother's speech. The bride's brother is gay and has been in a long-term relationship for 40+ years at time of writing. At the time he gave his speech about marriage, he couldn't marry the man he loved, and I think his passionate defense of marriage was born from that. When people would say they were against gay marriage because it makes a mockery of marriage, I'd think of that night. The married couple who had no respect for marriage could easily marry, and did over and over again. And the man who stood up and defended marriage could not. He's married now and lovingly takes care of his husband as he battles health issues. It's a special kind of thought process that leads a man to think that giving a speech about how much of a drag marriage is at a wedding will be a good idea. Well, at least he and his partner supported each other in that statement, for once. When they were doing the vows and the priest got to the for richer or poorer part, she said, for richer, or maybe poorer. The officiant wasn't pleased. I think they made it a year. I've got 2. One of my good friends got married and I'd never met her before the wedding because she's just shy. On the wedding day, she was belligerently drunk before the ceremony even started and couldn't even get through the lines she was supposed to repeat. Like, I promise to love you. She ended up slapping the groom, spilling champagne on her dress and then crying under a table while he tried to comfort her. They lasted about 4 months. Another one was my wife's friend. She's a very conservative, religious white girl who married a black man. Most of her racist family didn't approve of the marriage and didn't show up, but she planned the whole marriage around race. Like a vanilla cake for her and a chocolate cake for him, the wedding colors were black and white, and even the meals were white meat for her side and dark meat for his. It was extremely uncomfortable as a guest. They lasted 2 years, but broke up because he was nuts and attacked her, rather than the weird racial tension. My wedding will start 3 days before. The wedding was a Ren Fair-style wedding outside a large gazebo, and the maid of honor had promised to purchase a stylized dress for my bride that they'd agreed on. 3 days before the wedding, she calls to tell us she has no money and was embarrassed to admit it before now. So we literally hand-sewed one together in 24 hours. In my opinion, it turned out pretty nice for what we had. The bride's mother was supposed to pick up the cake in Austin, Texas, and drive an hour south for the wedding. She left her house 30 minutes before the wedding to pick it up. When she finally showed up, an hour late, the cake was destroyed. She had put it in the back seat and driven like hell all the way down, just slamming it against the box at every turn. During the 1-hour delay, there was almost a fistfight between 2 groomsmen because, well, the maid of honor showed up in the dress that she was unable to afford. Obvious attempt to upstage the bride. The same maid of honor during her speech after the ceremony started it off by saying, "When we all met, I didn't like Paul at all. However, I found he grows on you, like a fungus." Needless to say, my entire side of the family was super cold through all of this. Since all of these issues were on her side of friendships or families, I was told to suck it up and we'll discuss it later. I sort of assumed that a lot of these friends had just shown themselves the door. Quite the opposite. In fact, 2 years later when I accepted my first well-paying job out of college, it became an issue that it was an hour and a half out of Austin, so she just decided to stay in ATX to be with her friends. I mailed her the divorce papers, and since she couldn't be bothered to even show up for the hearing, I've never seen her again. I used to work at David's Bridal. The bride came in with tons of friends, we did the say yes to the dress thing, and an hour later she was standing there in $3,000 worth of stuff and doesn't have any money with her or in her account. She decides she wants to apply for the store credit card. I run it through the system and she gets denied. Then she calls the groom for his info, which to be fair, people did all the time, and he tells her no. She threw a huge fit on the phone with him, standing on the bridal stage literally demanding, "Why not? Why? Why?" Like an actual child over and over again. I've never seen a 30-year-old age backwards so quickly. She was just a brat, literally stomping her feet in front of me and all her friends and the other brides in the store. I was embarrassed. At the end of all that, she hangs up on him and her friend is like, "I'm so sorry you can't get your dress." And the bride instantly stops crying and goes, "Oh, I'll get the dress. I just have to do this at home, and when he gets mad enough, he'll come get it for me, so I'll stop." I was speechless. Sure enough, the girl came back 2 days later with her man and he applied for the credit card and brought the dress. He was livid and silent and she was smug as hell. Can't imagine they're living a happy marriage if they're still together. I'm witnessing one from the sidelines now. My wife's brother just got married this past May. The bride's mother is a big DIY person and went a little nuts with extra flowers, table pieces, decorations, and other things. Note that I said extra stuff. It was already decorated by the venue, she just took it upon herself to buy and add way more stuff. Anyway, a few weeks ago she sends my mother-in-law, the groom's mum, an email with receipts of all the extra stuff she brought. $7,000 worth, and asked that she pay half since it was technically set up in time for the rehearsal dinner for guests to enjoy. It's causing a huge rift between the newlyweds since the bride is taking her mum's side. My wife got invited to a client's daughter's wedding. The couple were both drama students, and many of the bridal party were drama students. The maid of honor's toast consisted of tearful declarations of unrequited love to the groom, along the lines of, "If it couldn't be me, I'm glad it's my best friend that's marrying you." The best man's speech was a lusty declaration of, "If it doesn't work out, call me, babe, like the previous time you called me." The other toasts were similarly weird. A guy at the table I was seated at was a friend of the bride and said to me that he was this close to standing up during the "speak now or forever hold your peace" thing. I'm still not sure if the whole thing was a bunch of emotionally messed up 20-year-olds or one big piece of performance art. As a man who has dabbled in theatre at a couple of different levels, I can confirm that drama students who take classes together have often seemed like a weird incestuous family. It's fine up until someone inevitably gets jealous. I was the maid of honor. Me, the best man, and the couple went into a separate little room to do the signing stuff. The bride excused herself to go to the bathroom, and the groom started making pretty mean remarks about her cooking. Her cooking is something she's really passionate about, by the way. He was making these comments to the officiary. She came back, heard they were talking about cooking family meals together, and gave him the warmest smile, thinking he had praised her. He scoffed awkwardly and changed the topic. That always stuck with me. He wasn't laughing with her, but at her, behind her back. They lasted 7 months. A fun, light-hearted dance with the groom, followed by a close and slow dance with her male best friend. How long did that marriage last? It lasted 18 months, and now she's living with the friend. He ended up in the emergency room between the ceremony and the reception. He had gone out the night before with his sister and friends and got plastered. They had to hold a cold pack to the back of his neck to keep him vertical during the wedding photos. Marriage lasted 30 days until they had a fight, she left the house, and he filled the U-Haul truck with everything but her clothes. The groom showed up to his own wedding reception wearing a t-shirt with restroom sign-style stick figures depicting a bride and a groom, captioned, "Game over." The bride had a bruised eye covered by makeup. Also, it was visible that walking was hurting her. I might think it was because the corset was pushing on broken ribs. It took her 3 years to run away. When my sister married her first husband, she mouthed to my father walking her down the aisle, I can make this work, right? They were divorced 6 months later. My whole family knew it wasn't a good idea since the original engagement was a year prior. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. When the bride drank vodka out of a pint glass and spent a significant amount of time making out with another guy on the dance floor. Oh well, the first part isn't necessarily a deal breaker. One of the best weddings I've ever been to included an Olympics between the bride and her bridesmaids, Russian, and the groom and his groomsmen, Lebanese. Main event was a vodka relay where they, no crap, chugged pint glasses. Lebanese put in a fantastic showing, but the Russians mopped the floor with them without even taking their heels off. It was hilarious. They all still managed to host and throw a wonderful party for another few hours, and they've been happily married for over a decade with 3 beautiful kids. Oh, and my husband just reminded me that these motherfrickers woke up the next morning and hosted brunch for us. Unbelievable. When the bride tried to playfully feed the groom some cake, pulling it back once it got close to his mouth. The third time she did this, he slapped it out of her hand and stormed off. In the ensuing awkward silence and wide-eyed staring, we all knew it wouldn't last. Surprisingly, they were together for nearly 2 years before the bride eloped away with her stepbrother. No one saw that coming. Prior to my wedding, I'd asked my husband to practice dancing with me because I'm uncoordinated due to a disability. He blew me off and said we'd be fine. As we were dancing, he spoke in my ear, not even quietly. "What are you doing? What's wrong with you? You're embarrassing me." We lasted 2 years. Leaving was the best decision I ever made. My uncle, when he broke his neck trying to break dance on his stag do, he went down the aisle in a wheelchair. She divorced shortly after. He can walk again now, but because of his surgery, he can't turn his neck. One of my go-to stories because it's freaking insane. Wedding videographer here. I think my favorite moment was when I was sitting at the miscellaneous table with all the randoms, and the girl next to me, the groom's ex, drunkenly admitted to sleeping with the groom a few months prior. I was at a wedding. I was a +1 for my date. The bride sat down drunk at our table and started talking to us. She then told me that she slept with her ex right before walking down the aisle. She screwed her ex in her wedding dress in the bridal suite. She then downed the last of my drink and went off to the dance floor. I was left speechless. I didn't know anyone but my date. Less than a year later, the bride and groom were divorced. He got so messed up at the reception, he had a fistfight with her cousin in the toilets over some white snow. He told all of the other cousins to F off. He hit on my aunt. He told my cousin's child to come back to him when she was 15 or 16, and he forgot to bring his own child to the hotel. I mean, I see absolutely no cracks in the foundation of those nuptials, and I'm roughly 28% sure that they may still be together. I was at a wedding when a phone went off during the ceremony, in the middle of exchanging vows. It was the groom's. He took the call. They're divorced now. One of my friends got married. Afterwards, she looked at me, crying, and said, "What did I do?" They were separated by the time the plane landed from their honeymoon. He was a good guy, she was a mess. The betta fish and the flower centerpieces lasted longer than the marriage. When they got married illegally in high school, 2 16-year-olds from different states who had to lie on their certificate to get approved by the state. It was annulled when the father of the groom found out. I actually know a happy version of this. My high school English teacher's friend and her boyfriend took a bus to the next state over where you could get married at age 16, and so they eloped in secret and came out about it after they graduated, and have been married for over 40 years and counting. My grandmother got married at 16 to my grandfather, who was 19. World War II hit and he was leaving to fight. In her own words, "I wanted to be his wife, even just for a little, and he didn't want to die before we were a family." He survived, came home, and they were happily married until death did them part. Where to start? We were the bride's friends, the only people that showed up from her side for the wedding. The best man was the groom's white snow dealer who got dressed in a tux, the only one in a tux. The groom was high on white snow and giggled throughout the whole ceremony. The host of the party alternated between arguing with his wife in Russian and running up to us whenever he saw us in groups of 2 or more to tell us, "Don't smoke green herb. If she, the host's wife, won't let me smoke green herb in the house, then you guys can't either." Every time we grouped up. The morning after the wedding at campfire coffee, the new bride turned to the groom and asked, "Are you going to wear your ring every day? Because it kind of makes you look like a slur for a gay person." Those of us there side-glanced and took deep sips of coffee. I think it lasted 4 to 6 months. My brother's ex-wife. Throughout the exchange of vows, she was looking at everyone but my brother, making sure all eyes were on her. Later, she instructed the photographer, a family friend who was cheap, to mingle and get shots of people being happy. Within 10 minutes, she had summoned the photographer back, shouting, "Whose wedding is this? I meant get shots of people being happy for me." The groom showed up drunk after golfing with buddies all day. The bride in her vows said, "for richer," and left out the poorer. The bachelor party and the bachelorette party were in Vegas at the same time, across the hall from each other. The bride and groom got in a huge fight on the last night of the trip. When I was leaving, I said, "I'll see you guys at the wedding," to the groom, and he replied, "I'm not sure there's gonna be one." There was a wedding, but they were divorced within 18 months, I believe. One of my friends was the best man at another friend of ours' wedding. His best man speech included this line, "I prepared some lines for tonight, but the groom sniffed them all in the bathroom." 3 months later, there was a divorce due to a white snow problem. At my boyfriend's sister's wedding, the groom got drunk before the vows and smoked green herb after the vows, was cross-faded as heck and made a fool of himself. When we went up to congratulate them after, she refused to be near him or take pictures with him. It was awkward. After the speeches, basically everyone left. Family was still around and they opened gifts. Someone gifted nice champagne and the groom tried to open it and dropped it and it shattered. Bride stormed off screaming. The groom got upset and started cussing out the air. They still went to their honeymoon together in Florida and she got pregnant almost immediately. Maybe 7 months into her pregnancy, she kicked him out because he slept with her roommate. They got divorced when their kid was 6 months old. But it's for the best. The guy is an absolute piece of crap and wasted a lot of their money by being selfish on their day. I worked at a museum that also doubled as a wedding venue in the summers. As part of the wedding package, the museum would stay open after hours for the guests only, so I just sit there and greet people basically. One wedding got particularly rowdy, almost everyone was drunk, people were jumping into the fountain, and someone hurled in said fountain. At one point, the bride is crying. Turns out the groom and one of his groomsmen were doing the deed upstairs in one of the bathrooms. A fight ensued between the groom and the father of the bride, and the cops were called because it got really ugly. Entertaining for me, but I felt so bad for the bride. You know, everything about this wedding just screams British upper class, and I can't quite put my finger on why. I just can't see it happening in any other country or level of society. 2 friends of mine got married, and when they gave their vows, the guys started laughing at the part about being faithful. Whoops. I once watched a live stream of the wrong Vegas wedding. The link I was given for a friend's wedding was incorrect, and during the exchange of vows, the groom got to the part about being faithful and the bride visibly and audibly chuckled. It was hilarious to watch, but I bet they didn't last long. The groom and best man had a dancing routine for getting into the church ceremony, and they got nearly halfway through it, and I guess the groom felt they hadn't received much applause and wows from us, the attendees, and decided to go back to the entrance and start all over again. Why is no one having a good time? I specifically requested it. They were together since junior high and would break up and reconcile every 3 to 6 months. Everyone was just sick of it. Friends and family, and the marriage, at age 19 in the summer between freshman and sophomore year at college, was obviously an attempt to force the relationship to stick. It did not, but at least no kids got involved. The entire bridal party, including parents of the wedded couple, entered into a betting pool of how long the marriage would last at the wedding reception. I should say the bride and groom didn't participate, but everyone else did. That would have been glorious. If I recall correctly, the best man won. Price is Right rules at 14 months. The groom got into a fistfight with the father of the bride. Split after 4 months. Context, the groom and bride's dad, actually most people in these families if I'm honest, have pretty aggressive drinking problems. Father-in-law has always hated him. I wasn't around for what actually set it off, but it ended when the bride got in the middle, got an elbow in the eye, and the happy couple left for the night. This was in rural Canada. Not Letterkenny, but basically Letterkenny. I'd say the father-in-law won the fight though. The best man's speech was about how selfishly the groom had acted during a night out and telling him to treat marriage differently. The groom had a best woman instead of a best man. Nothing wrong with that, but her toast left the whole room in awkward silence because she was clearly in love with him. I wish I could remember the specifics, but it was all about how they were always together, all the late nights they'd spent together, etc. She was so tearful during it too. I'm not making it sound as bad as it was, but I assure you, it was bad. Portuguese wedding. A fistfight broke out at the head table during the reception, between 2 groomsmen. They were arguing about which of them had slept with the bride first. The groom was oblivious. He came home from work early one day 2 years later and caught her in bed with another man. I'm surprised it took that long. The midnight buffet was amazing, though. The most beautiful wedding I've ever been to ended in divorce. The venue was where the groom's father is buried, and he cried as he made his vows to the bride there. Turned out he'd been cheating on her for months, and they divorced a while later. Something so repugnant about marrying someone you're cheating on practically over your father's grave. To date, it's the only wedding I've been to that ended in divorce. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out Easy Mode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.